One night, Keanu Reeves walked into his own Los Angeles restaurant, unannounced and unnoticed. But what he discovered behind the scenes left him shocked. Instead of the welcoming atmosphere he envisioned, he found fear spreading among his staff, caused by someone he had trusted to maintain harmony. Faced with this unsettling truth, Keanu had a choice: should he step in immediately or observe quietly to understand the full picture? What would you do in his place? Let us know in the comments. And while you're here, tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing our community from all over the world. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where we bring you powerful true stories of kindness, resilience, and courage. Now, let's dive into what happened that night and how Keanu's response left his employees stunned and grateful. Keanu Reeves is no stranger to surprising the public with unassuming acts of generosity. While best known for his film roles, he's also gained a reputation for being exceptionally kind off-screen. In an industry often marked by ego and extravagance, Keanu stands out for his grounded approach, quiet nature, and genuine concern for everyday folks. That's exactly why, a few years back, he decided to invest in something beyond Hollywood, a restaurant that he felt could bring both great dining experiences and a supportive work environment to the bustling city of Los Angeles. He named this establishment Serenity. Initially, many assumed it was just a vanity project, the kind of place celebrities set up to flash their status. But Keanu had no interest in flashy decor or overpriced tasting menus that only catered to the elite. Sure, Serenity was meant to be a nice, maybe even high-end, place, but he insisted from day one that it be welcoming to everyone: families seeking a memorable meal, first-daters wanting an intimate atmosphere, and even tourists or travelers looking for top-notch local cuisine. Above all, he wanted it to be a place where staff felt respected. In countless interviews, Keanu has talked about how success means little if the people who make your success possible are struggling under poor conditions. Despite being busy with film shoots, meetings, and philanthropic endeavors, Keanu always tried to keep tabs on Serenity. He would glance at financial reports, chat briefly with the head chef or manager, and occasionally ask employees how things were going. But numbers on a page or quick greetings can miss crucial details about day-to-day dynamics. A restaurant can look profitable and well-run while deeper issues fester behind the scenes. When staff members sense that the boss is only around for formal visits, they might hold back, fearing repercussions if they reveal negative truths. Keanu wanted to avoid that fear-induced silence. So every few months, he would drop in quietly, no entourage, no pre-announcement, no special seat with a sign reading owner. He'd show up in casual clothes, maybe a slightly baggy hoodie, a well-worn pair of jeans, and simple sneakers, hoping to blend in. He'd request a table like any other diner, possibly chat with the bartenders or servers, and keep an ear open for real insights. This approach let him witness the genuine atmosphere. Did the employees look stressed? Did customers seem cared for? Did the manager treat the staff fairly? In many of these surprise visits, everything checked out. Employees recognized that some days had rough patches, maybe a big reservation canceled, or a supplier messed up an order, but they also felt that the leadership had their backs. Overall, the restaurant ran smoothly under positive management. Keanu was proud of that and would walk away content. Yet he also knew that life wasn't always going to be so neat. The unexpected is always lurking, especially in a business as hectic and personal as hospitality. One mild evening in Los Angeles, the temperature hovering around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, a typical pleasant California night, Keanu Reeves decided on a whim to do one of his walk-ins at Serenity. He recalled it was a Friday, around 7 p.m., a peak time for dinner rush. In his mind, he pictured guests savoring the chef's signature dishes, like the grilled salmon with a lemon garlic butter sauce or the prime ribeye marinated in herbs. He hoped to see employees guiding guests with confident smiles. Maybe he'd even catch a delightful snippet of conversation about how the dessert menu had improved. Walking in through the main entrance, he noticed a host greeting guests with polite warmth. Soft ambient lighting bathed the dining area in a golden hue. Everything seemed just as he'd envisioned, families chatting, a couple at a corner table whispering sweet nothings, a group of co-workers clinking cocktail glasses after a long week. The scents of sautéed garlic, rosemary, and freshly baked bread wove together into a welcoming aroma. But as Keanu stepped further into the restaurant, he felt something intangible, an underlying tension. Restaurant floors are typically alive with controlled chaos, servers rushing plates, bartenders mixing drinks, managers scanning the floor for potential issues. Yet there was a subtle undercurrent that suggested more than just busy dinner service. A few employees hustled past with pursed lips and furrowed brows, as though carrying invisible burdens. He meandered toward the bar, planning to order a simple glass of water or a light soda, but on the way, he passed a narrow corridor leading to a break room. That's when he heard it, a muffled sob, quiet yet desperate, the kind of cry you make when you're trying not to be heard but can't hold your emotions in check. It lasted just a second or two, then fell silent, but it was enough to stop him in his tracks. Keanu paused, discreetly scanning the area to ensure no one was watching him. He leaned a little closer to the break room door, which was slightly ajar. Through that small opening, he glimpsed a scene that tightened his chest. A young waitress, eyes red and face tense, was clutching the edge of a metal countertop, as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Next to her stood another employee, a young man who seemed torn between comforting her and urging her to do something that might help. Even though their voices were low, Keanu caught fragments of dialogue. "I can't say no. He'll cut my hours. You don't have to take this. It's not right. I need the paycheck, I can't lose it." Hearing those words, Keanu felt a surge of empathy and anger. He'd heard of manipulative bosses taking advantage of vulnerable workers, especially in industries like hospitality, where people rely heavily on hourly wages and tips to make ends meet. He suspected the tears were about more than just stress over a busy shift. Someone in the restaurant, presumably the manager, had taken advantage of his authority. The question was, how far did it go, and how many people were affected? Rather than barging in with immediate accusations, Keanu decided to gather more facts. He retreated to the bar area, where he found a seat and waved down the bartender. He asked for water, took a sip, then struck up casual conversation. The bartender had a polite smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Keanu gently probed how the night was going, whether the staff seemed overworked, or if things were running as expected. The bartender answered with standard niceties, "We're doing fine, it's busy but manageable." Yet a subtle tension in his voice suggested otherwise. Sensing he wouldn't get the full story just by chatting to the bartender, Keanu turned to observe the manager. A tall man in a navy blue dress shirt patrolled the dining floor like a hawk. His posture was rigid, arms often crossed, and when he looked at an employee, Keanu noticed a flicker of unease in that person's expression. Some managers can be strict yet fair, others cultivate fear to maintain control. From the looks of it, this man was the latter. A knot formed in Keanu's stomach. This was the kind of scenario he'd hoped never to find in his establishment. Shortly thereafter, the young man from the break room emerged, heading back to the dining area. He wore a standard Serenity uniform and carried a stack of menus. His face still looked flustered. Keanu seized the moment. Approaching the server station, he asked politely if the young man had a pen he could borrow. Under that guise, he introduced himself casually, though not by name, and gently mentioned that he'd overheard someone crying. The server stiffened, clearly torn between fear and moral concern. Keanu assured him in a calm voice that if something was wrong, it was safe to say so. But the young man's eyes flicked nervously to the manager, who was not too far away. He replied in hushed words that the waitress in the break room, her name was Emily, felt trapped by the manager's demands. Keanu asked what those demands were, but the server shook his head, murmuring, "She's terrified. She can't afford to lose her job. He's singled her out. Always calls her to the office late at night, says if she doesn't cooperate, he'll dock her hours or put her on the worst shifts." The server then cut the conversation short, worried the manager would see them talking too long. Before Keanu could press for further details, the manager himself approached. From the corner of his eye, Keanu saw the man's measured strides, felt his controlling energy as he demanded to know if there was an issue. The server quickly scurried off, offering a mumbled apology for the delay in serving a nearby table. Alone now, the manager eyed Keanu. In that moment, it was obvious the manager had no clue about Keanu's true identity. To him, this was just a meddling customer who might be prying into staff matters. The man forced a polite grin, asked if Keanu needed help finding his table. Keanu matched the grin with a casual smile and said no, he was all set. The manager narrowed his eyes slightly, as if to say, "Stay out of my business," before turning away. Keanu Reeves, used to reading people from years of navigating the film industry, recognized a man who enjoyed scaring subordinates. It confirmed that the tears in the break room were no small matter. This manager likely believed no one had the power to challenge him. Little did he know the quiet observer in front of him owned the entire restaurant. Keanu decided to step out for some fresh air, a strategy both to gather his own thoughts and to ensure no immediate confrontation with the manager would happen in front of guests. Outside, in the mild LA night, he took a few deep breaths. The lights from passing cars streaked by. The city never truly sleeps, and 1,000 small dramas play out in every corner. He checked his phone, not to read messages but to record a few notes about what he'd heard. If he was going to act decisively, he wanted to be crystal clear about the situation. While he was standing there, the bartender, Nate, stepped out for what seemed like his short break. Keanu nodded politely, then softly asked Nate how long the manager had been in charge. The bartender hesitated, glancing back at the restaurant door, then quietly admitted the manager. Rick Calloway had been around for a while, but only in recent months had his behavior become so toxic. He singled out employees who were vulnerable, those who needed every dollar, or who lacked confidence to push back. If they complained, he'd threaten to cut their hours, effectively slashing their income. Keanu, jaw tightening, thanked Nate. The bartender added that Emily, the waitress who had been crying, was particularly susceptible since she was supporting a relative with medical issues. She couldn't risk losing any hours. Hearing that detail made Keanu's blood boil. It's one thing to run a tight ship, but quite another to exploit someone desperate to pay bills. Re-entering the restaurant, Keanu walked past the half-full dining area. The dinner rush was easing into a calmer period. Fewer customers remained, which allowed him to scan the place more freely without drawing too much attention. He spotted Emily finishing up with a table of 4. Her expression remained tense, though she mustered a pleasant tone for the guests. Her eyes, however, betrayed her emotional exhaustion. She collected used dishes and retreated toward the server station. Keanu followed, timing his movements so they'd cross paths without the manager noticing right away. He gently tapped Emily on the arm, introduced himself only as someone who cares, and said he'd overheard she was in trouble. Emily froze. She trembled a bit, glancing around to see if Rick was watching. She whispered she couldn't talk about it, that she was sorry, and that she needed the job too badly to risk any fuss. But her watery eyes and unsteady hands told Keanu all he needed to know. She was at her limit, frightened to speak, but equally desperate for help. In that charged moment, Rick suddenly appeared. He demanded to know if Emily was slacking off. Emily's shoulders hunched as though expecting a blow from the mere tone of his voice. Keanu turned to face Rick. The manager's face twisted with annoyance, but he remained outwardly polite. He suggested the conversation should end and that Emily should get back to her station. That was enough. Keanu exhaled slowly, controlling his anger, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small wallet containing his executive ownership credentials for Serenity. With a calm, even voice that carried the weight of quiet authority, Keanu announced who he really was. "My name is Keanu Reeves, and I own this restaurant." Stunned silence draped the room. Emily gasped audibly, stepping back with wide eyes. A few curious patrons leaned in, trying to piece together what was happening. The manager's smirk disappeared, replaced by a pallor that suggested he felt the ground slipping from under him. He stammered something about misunderstandings and no real problem, but Keanu cut him off by calmly stating that he'd witnessed enough to know there was indeed a problem. What followed felt like an emotional high-wire act. Employees, emboldened by Keanu's presence and outraged by months of fear, started speaking up. Tyler recounted how Rick had cornered Emily multiple times. Another staff member admitted she, too, had been forced to comply with humiliating demands. A kitchen worker half-stepped into the hallway, nodding in agreement that they'd seen Emily stay after hours, tear-streaked, only to emerge from the manager's office visibly shaken. Rick tried to defend himself, claiming he was simply enforcing discipline and high standards. But Keanu, with a calm but laser-focused stare, responded that there was a stark difference between discipline and abuse of power. One aims to maintain quality, while the other thrives on fear. He asked Emily directly, in front of those gathered, if she felt threatened by Rick. Her voice quivered, but she finally managed a nod, tears pricking her eyes again. "I can't lose this job," she whispered, "but he kept telling me if I didn't do what he said, I'd regret it." That confession broke the dam. Another staff member spoke up about the manager's manipulative schedule changes. Someone else mentioned overhearing Rick speak about employees as if they were disposable. The net closed around Rick, who was left with no plausible denial. Under normal circumstances, he might have fired employees on the spot for daring to speak up, but now he was the one at the mercy of Keanu's judgment. The power dynamic had flipped in an instant. An air of relief, tempered with residual fear, filled the restaurant as Keanu declared Rick's tenure over. In a calm tone, he told Rick to gather his things and leave. Rick sputtered, accusing the staff of conspiring against him, but nobody listened. The employees, many of whom had cowered in silence just minutes before, visibly relaxed, some letting out shaky laughter or hugging each other. Emily stood, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her posture straighter than before. No longer did she need to hide her distress or obey Rick's demands out of fear. As the manager left, Keanu turned to the employees. He apologized for not uncovering this situation sooner and assured them that, effective immediately, changes would be made to ensure no one would face intimidation or threats again. He asked them to be open and honest, to come to him or to human resources if anything felt off. The sense of unity was palpable, like a family that had been through a storm and saw the clouds finally parting. Some of the remaining customers, who had followed the commotion from their tables, applauded softly. They might not have known the full details, but they grasped that something just and necessary had occurred. The waitress who had been crying in the back room wore a different expression now, gratitude mixed with liberation. Tyler placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, and she mouthed a quiet, "Thank you," in Keanu's direction. After Rick stormed out, Keanu took a few moments to speak with each department: line cooks, dishwashers, servers, bartenders, hosts, everyone. He told them that if they felt uneasy, they should share their concerns. More than anything, he emphasized that the restaurant wasn't just a brand or a source of profit, it was a place run by people with real needs, real hopes, and real dreams. One by one, employees exhaled months of pent-up tension. They repeated stories of small humiliations, unfair shift allocations, or withheld breaks that Rick had enforced. Keanu asked them for direct input on how to improve. Some suggested a more transparent scheduling system. Others wanted a designated person they could talk to confidentially if any manager displayed controlling or manipulative behavior. Keanu promised he'd make those changes happen. Real leadership, he believed, meant you took care of your people. And if a manager turned a workplace into a fear-filled environment, that manager had no place there. The entire staff, some still emotional, thanked him. A few even said they'd been fans of his movies but never expected him to show the same sense of justice and compassion in real life. He laughed softly, urging them to see him not as a movie star but as someone who genuinely cared. With the drama subsided, the restaurant eventually closed for the night. Most of the customers had either finished their meals during the confrontation or left soon after, but a handful lingered, wanting to meet Keanu and share how moved they were by what he'd done. He took time to greet them, politely making sure not to overshadow the employees' roles. After all, the employees had borne the brunt of Rick's behavior for months. Outside, in the refreshing 65 degrees Fahrenheit evening air, employees started trickling out of Serenity. Many paused to speak briefly with Keanu, some just giving a nod and a thankful smile, others offering a handshake or even a tearful hug. Tyler confided how he had nearly quit the month before but stuck around only because he liked his coworkers. The idea that the place's owner was oblivious to what Rick was doing had eroded Tyler's trust, until now. Emily, the young waitress at the center of it all, approached hesitantly. Her eyes were still puffy from crying, but her voice had steadied. She tried apologizing for causing a scene. Keanu shook his head and said she had no reason to apologize. The only regret he expressed was that he hadn't uncovered this problem sooner. Gently, he reminded her that she was free now, that her job was secure, and that if any manager ever tried such tactics again, she could come straight to him or HR. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but these were tears of relief. She expressed how the job, though physically demanding, was essential to supporting a sick relative at home. Losing it would have been devastating, so she had felt cornered. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, telling her he respected her courage to speak out. Courage, he said, often blooms in moments of pain and desperation. While driving home through the gently winding Los Angeles streets, Keanu couldn't shake the swirl of emotions in his mind. This was precisely the scenario he dreaded: someone with power, subverting the spirit of a place he'd created to do good. He recalled a conversation he once had with a friend who owned a small business. The friend claimed that if you treat employees too kindly, they'll slack off. Keanu disagreed. He argued that employees generally respect fair leadership and reciprocate with loyalty. Tonight's events confirmed his stance. The staff had responded to him with openness and relief, not because he threatened them, but because he offered them genuine empathy and a better way forward. He recognized something else, too: leaders must never rely solely on middle management to define the workplace culture. By occasionally blending into the crowd, you see truths that remain hidden when people know you're watching. If he had walked in with an entourage or given advanced notice of his arrival, Rick might have temporarily acted polite, and Emily might have felt too intimidated to reveal what was really happening. Instead, the raw, unscripted environment let him see the unfiltered reality, a manager abusing his post. The deeper moral resonates far beyond the walls of a single restaurant. In any environment, an office, a warehouse, a school, wherever a hierarchy exists, there's the risk of someone at the top exploiting those below them. People in that environment might keep silent out of fear. The differences in power, money, and social standing can create a sense of helplessness among employees. Yet if just one person with enough influence chooses to intervene, the entire dynamic can pivot from darkness to light. Keanu's actions also highlight the importance of trusting your instincts. Early in the night, he sensed something was off, even though from a casual glance everything appeared fine. By following that intuition, he discovered a toxic situation before it spiraled further. His story encourages us all to remain sensitive to small signs, unspoken tensions, fleeting glances of fear, unusual hushes in conversation. Often, these subtle cues point to bigger, hidden problems that need addressing. The reason this story tugs at our hearts is because it's about more than one manager or one actress turned restaurateur. It's about universal principles, empathy, moral courage, and the willingness to stand up for others when it would be simpler to walk away. In a world that sometimes feels cold or transactional, moments like these restore our belief in goodness. Keanu had no script, no camera crew to record his heroics, and no guaranteed applause. He simply saw injustice and said, "Not on my watch." That personal commitment to doing the right thing can feel rare, but it's deeply inspiring when it does surface. By morning, the story of what happened at Serenity had begun to spread among employees, their friends, and the few diners who witnessed the confrontation. Some posted on social media, praising the quiet diner who turned out to be the restaurant's famous owner. A few short videos captured the moment he revealed himself and told the manager to leave. Though Keanu himself never broadcasted the event, the staff's gratitude rippled outward. For them, it marked a fresh start, a new era where they could focus on delivering excellent service without living in fear of punishment or humiliation. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant underwent some policy updates, transparent scheduling procedures, a direct line to human resources for reporting misconduct, and a zero-tolerance stance on harassment. Keanu made sure to hold small group meetings with staff members to hear them out. Some had minor complaints about issues like breaks or tipping procedures, but overall, they were relieved that a single malignant presence no longer hovered over them. Emily, more confident now, no longer dreaded her shifts. She still worked hard, sometimes even pulling double shifts to support her family, but she did so in an environment that felt safe. Tyler commented that the entire atmosphere had become friendlier, almost lighter. The staff realized the owner genuinely cared, a feeling that's not always common in big city establishments. In the grand scheme of things, you might ask, how big is this event? It's not about saving the world from some colossal threat, but it is about saving real people from daily misery. That's the key. When someone in power steps in to correct an abuse, it resonates beyond that single place. It reminds everyone that good leaders do exist and that empathy can triumph over exploitation. People who learn this story might carry the message into their own workplaces, families, or communities, ready to speak up when they see wrongdoing. The fundamental takeaway is that leadership means stepping forward when you realize something's amiss. It means doing more than signing paychecks or reading profit-loss statements. It means understanding that a business's soul is shaped by how each person is treated, from the dishwasher at the bottom rung to the general manager up top. No one, in Keanu's eyes, is too small to matter, and that's what makes him not just a star but, in many ways, a role model for everyday leadership. A single cry in the back room changed the fate of an entire staff that night. Keanu Reeves might be known to the world as a beloved actor, but to these employees, he became something far more important, the protective, principled leader who acted on his beliefs. When you think about it, we can all learn from his example. Corporate hierarchies and fancy job titles don't guarantee integrity. What truly matters is whether someone sees an injustice and chooses to stand against it. Power isn't about bossing people around. It's about taking responsibility for them. Whether you manage a small coffee shop, run a large corporation, or lead a community group, your most significant impact often comes from how you treat those you're responsible for. If you look away when trouble brews, you're allowing bad behavior to thrive. But if you step in, even at personal risk, you can transform a workplace from oppressive to uplifting in a heartbeat. We hope this story leaves you feeling inspired and reminded that even small acts of courage can spark major change. You don't have to be a Hollywood star to do good. Anyone, in any position, has the power to defend someone in need, to ask a simple question, "Are you okay?" and to say, "This can't go on." Now, let's circle back to the question we asked at the start. If you were in Keanu's place, would you have confronted the manager immediately, or gathered more information first? Let us know in the comments by saying 1 for immediate confrontation, or 2 for a bit more observation. Don't forget to share where you're watching from. Are you in sunny California, rugged Montana, or perhaps the heart of the Midwest? And if this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Motivation for Success. We share uplifting, thought-provoking tales just like this one, stories about everyday heroes and surprising acts of kindness that can remind us all how to be braver and kinder in our own lives. If you know someone who might need the hope or motivation that this story provides, send it their way. You never know who might be needing that extra spark of courage to stand up for what's right. Thank you for spending your time with us. We look forward to seeing your thoughts in the comments, and we'll catch you in the next video, where we dive into another real-life narrative that proves hope, compassion, and moral resolve are still alive and well in this world. Take care, stay inspired, and never hesitate to be the light in someone else's darkness.